Welcome back to our program here on Newsmax TV. I'm J.D. Hayworth.
And I'm John Bachman. Thanks for sticking around and hanging out with us here on this Friday on America's Forum. J.D., in your home state.
My native North Carolina.
I know you're upset about this when hundreds, if not thousands of cases of potential voter fraud have been uncovered. State elections officials have identified hundreds of registered voters in North Carolina who also voted in other states in 2012. Each of the 765 cases now being investigated. A law passed last year required election staff to check information for North Carolina's voters against a database for 28 additional states in an attempt to prevent the same kind of voter fraud. Joining us right now to discuss this is the Executive Director of the Voter Integrity Project, Jay DeLancy.
Jay DeLancy, old friend, it is great to have you with us. For purposes of full disclosure, Jay and I go way back, even to high school days. He was going to Sanderson High School in Raleigh, and I was at High Point Central. And now we've grown up, and Jay, you have kept your eye on this process. How did this happen in North Carolina last year?
Well, JD, thanks for having me. And it was one of these deals where 2 years ago, we started pushing, we started researching, and actually in early 2013, we found out that we could get Florida's voter roll very easily. And we found out, by researching it, we discovered enough information to get the Board of Elections to agree to refer 5 people over for prosecution for voting in both Florida and North Carolina. And so we then used that information. We made news out of that and then went to the legislature and said, can you please join the interstate data check program? We didn't know what to call it, the multi-state database that was run out of Kansas. And that was our big push to the legislature. And they did it. They put it into the law. And so what we saw last week, or a couple of days ago, was the fruit of that after North Carolina joined the consortium where they exchanged data with 27 other states and try and analyze the data to check for duplicate registrations and duplicate voters. They came up with a stunning announcement last week.
And this announcement, the headlines I've seen, Jay, say that as many as 36,000 registered voters in North Carolina may be registered elsewhere. Now, I could not help but notice that the left-leaning, and this may be a euphemism, the left-leaning Raleigh News and Observer is saying, well, there's nothing to see here, and you have to look at this real carefully. Give us the facts as you see them on the ground, Jay. What the heck has gone on in North Carolina?
North Carolina is no different than any other state, except that the progressives really moved into here in a big way in the past, and they're still here. Now, News Observer is right. We do have to analyze it carefully, but let's get it right now. There's about 36,000 people whose first name, last name, and date of birth all match. And these aren't just registered. These are people who registered and voted in November of 2012. Or I don't know when they registered, but they are registered and they voted in November of 2012. So these are dual voters. Now the question is it a close match? Is it an exact match? Well, of those, about 675 of them actually gave their last 4 socials that match. Now what the left is doing is running around saying, oh, the rest of them, their socials didn't match. That's a lie, because really the deal is, well, some of them, they don't match. Some of them, they actually just wrote a number in there, as you can do. When you register to vote, any number you put in there is going to be considered your social. But also, a lot of states, federal law allows you to either use your social or your driver's license number. So if you use your driver's license number in Florida, for instance, and use your social in North Carolina, they're not going to match. So when you widen your criteria to ignore the social and just look at the other personally identifying information, first name, last name, date of birth, they found 36,515 names that are in that pool of people who voted in those states. That's a huge number, and you know it's going to come down, but they're investigating 36,515 voters whose first name, last name, and date of birth suggest that they voted in 2 states.
Wow. Jay, obviously other things have to be done to really do a type of thorough forensic investigation. What are you calling on the state legislature in North Carolina, called the North Carolina General Assembly? What is it the state legislature needs to do right now?
Okay, well, on that 36,000, I've already talked to the Board of Elections, and they're not going to destroy that evidence. But what we'd like to see them do, is a very critical piece of evidence nationwide that when anyone votes, not just North Carolina, whenever you vote, you sign a piece of paper, and then you go over to another table and you exchange that piece of paper for a ballot. And that piece of paper has a destruction order on it after 22 months by federal law. Now, any state could extend that forever. In North Carolina, we would like them to scan those documents and keep them, because that is the only evidence you have that someone stole your identity. If any of these 36,000 people they didn't commit fraud, they didn't even know it. When they look at that piece of paper, in North Carolina we call it an authorization to vote. It might be a ticket to vote, it might be I don't know what they call it in your state, but there's a name for that document. And that piece of paper has your signature on it the day you go to vote. And so to prosecute fraud, they look at two pieces of paper in each state. You've got your registration and your authorization to vote in, say, Florida. And then in North Carolina, you have your registration and authorization to vote. So if all four of those things match, that's proof that you committed fraud. Now, if they don't match, it is not proof. Well, how do I put this? If they don't match, it is proof that fraud was committed in your name. In other words, somebody stole your identity and voted in your place.
Wow. Jay, it's hard enough to identify this type of vote fraud in the first place, but apparently even harder to follow through with investigations and prosecutions. We had the case recently in Ohio where a woman admitting to voting several times for President Obama in 2012, but she's not going to be prosecuted. Do you see any plans in the future to take this any further? Do you see any potential here for criminal prosecution?
Yeah, there will be a great deal of criminal prosecution on this one for sure, because it's drawn this much attention. But what we have sensitized the election board to do is sequester any of those where the signature doesn't match, because we know a vote was cast. If the registrations clearly indicate that a vote was cast in two states under the name of one person, then while they can't prosecute you for fraud, if there's a fake signature on one of those tickets to vote or one of those forms, that still a fraud was committed. And so this whole problem of prosecutors not caring, and legislators not really caring, and even the political parties not caring as much as they ought to. Ultimately, this is a movement nationwide that people want accountability, they want open and honest elections. So the only way this is going to be fixed is by people like you and me and people watching these broadcasts, if they will start contacting their elected leaders and demanding prosecution, demanding better laws, better ID, more accountability in this process.
Jay, I've been away from North Carolina for a long time, but as a native North Carolinian and as a guy who's known you for the better part of my life, I just have to ask you, are you confident in the election process in North Carolina as a North Carolina voter?
Well, I'm more confident now than I was. The North Carolina legislature, in one bill, 149-page bill, they had to try and eliminate as many loopholes as they could. And these are loopholes. North Carolina has been like Korea or North Korea or Cuba. We've been one-party control for 140 years. And so Republicans, for the first time, reform-minded Republicans, push forward laws that make it better. And it's really tough sledding. We've got the NAACP and the League of Women Voters. They're filing frivolous lawsuits, and they're harassing us financially to make us. They want our membership information. They want all kinds of stuff.
It's a real problem, Jay. We're going to have to leave it there right now, but we look forward to having you visit us again and update us on what's transpiring in North Carolina back here on America's Forum. Just remember, John, if it's happening there, it could be happening other places. More news ahead. Stay with us on America's Forum.